Thank you all for coming. I promise to not keep you here for too long. Uh, so Virtual Madness at Etsy, as Joanne mentioned, this is the virtual machine management platform. What that means is we have a lot of virtual machines running mostly for development purposes, and this is the tool we use to manage it up, to spin up new machines, to set it up for different purposes that we have essentially. I'm Nishan Subedi. I work on the DevTools team at Etsy. So if you guys haven't heard of Etsy, we're an online marketplace for handmade and vintage goods. If you make something, put it up on Etsy, you could sell it to people all over the world. Um, Etsy currently has around 275 engineers, and this is relevant because these engineers are the primary consumers of the virtual machine management system. So this is an internal app, and the workflow is whenever a new engineer joins, they're given a development machine, which is a virtual machine. But we also have all these virtual machines available for other purposes. Say, one of the recent use cases was we're testing out Yarn for Hadoop, so we spun up a dev cluster in virtual machines, and so we're coming with newer and newer workflows on this. A little bit about DevTools. DevTools is an infrastructure team, which means that we focus more on the infrastructure side of things. So we do all the plumbing, the pipelining. We get our systems to run smoothly, a lot of chef work and system configuration stuff, which leads me to my next point. We're not necessarily good at JavaScript. Iframes are something you would see quite a bit in the code we have. We're trying to decrease that, of course, but we're not there yet. And we build a lot of tooling. So a lot of the work we do is trying to glue two different systems together, and to do that, we end up writing a lot of small tools here and there. So Virtual Madness, this is what it used to look like before we went to Marionette. This had been working for us pretty fine till almost till last year, and this was built around 2007. And as you can notice, we had a bunch of different flags we could set. You could have a search VM if you were working on the search stack. Otherwise, you'd get a regular VM. It worked for a while, but we figured out that we were doing a lot more exciting things with our virtual machine, so we wanted to make it more accessible to the users to use it. So we started looking at the code to change it, and then that's when you realize things were not as well as we thought they were. To give you examples, this is copied straight off of the way the tool used to look like before. And by the way, throughout this presentation, I'll be showing you a bunch of code. I won't expect you to read it. Just look at the things that are in bold, and you don't even have to read it. I'm mostly showing patterns of how these things are organized. So yeah, this is what it used to look like. As you can see, there's data in the DOM. If you click a few buttons, if you go around, your state is undefined. You don't know what the app's going to do anymore. You're going to have all these arcane bugs. Everyone's been there. We just took a little bit longer to get to the new hotness. Other stuff. We were including a bunch of files in PHP, and essentially we're defining states in the files that were included. So filters.php would have a bunch of stuff defined, and then we'd use it here, and we have no idea what's happening because we don't have access to what the data is. If you look at it a little bit lower, you can see a PHP variable that essentially defines JavaScript tags. And inside of that, we have another PHP variable where all the data comes from. And we're somehow putting it onto the page. I don't really know how this worked. And we have a bunch of inlined HTML, PHP, everything you can throw at it. So we realized this is not going to scale, and we wanted something more scalable. But being an infrastructure team as we were, we had some concerns around JavaScript. We felt like we understood vanilla JavaScript, but we didn't understand anything about frameworks. We were under the impression that it was going to be a lot of method chaining hell. There were so many frameworks around. There's Ember, there's Angular. We didn't know what to pick. We sort of eventually ended up picking Marionette, but these were sort of what we were thinking at before we started, and now we realize that we're really living in the Stone Ages at that time when we could have access to all these fancy things like Tom Cruise, as Jason Lester pointed out. So yeah, what's my point, right? If I'm not good at JavaScript, why listen to me? I guess my central message is if we can build it, so can you. What I want to highlight is how easy it has made us. Marionette has made it for us to build all these cool things, and we were easily able to make this, so you guys should totally be able to make it. Um, so a quick overview of the technologies that we use to build this. All the other pieces were there from before, except, well, not Mustache, I guess. You saw how our HTML looked like. But Marionette was our central piece. Mustache was something the entire company used. We just used it because we didn't feel strongly either ways. Socket.io we use for some log streaming stuff, but PHP and jQuery we had from before. At this point, I want to show you a quick demo of what the app looks like, just so you understand the kinds of things I talk about later. So we log into the tool. We see a list of virtual machines. These are all the machines. You can search on them. You can click that button to create a machine. You can fill out the different options, and you've seen these before. There's some more added, and then you click the button essentially, and so this starts making the machines. And then those lines you see are log lines from the server that the code is running on, and you can sort of interact with them. So this is all the commands that we need to run to create a machine. So the create is started, and then we go back to the main page and we search for the VMs that are there. We find that one's still bootstrapping. And you can look at some other machine that's around. So we can see the chef status, for example. What's the status of chef running on that machine? And you can sort of poke around it. So I'm just going to delete it because I just created it to show you guys. So a modal pops up, you can delete it, and delete is again another set of commands we execute on some server, and it gives you the same interaction. Notice that you can still interact with the main application downstairs even when the delete is running. You can do all kinds of things you do with lists, like you can sort them and whatever you might want to do. So I found this VM that's not used, that shouldn't be there. So I just click on it, and I can go look at it, see if it's actually useful, and then delete it if I want to. And this is happening while that other delete is still going on. And if you see up there, there was a notification saying the first VM deleted successfully. So yeah, I guess I'm just playing around with the UI now. Yeah, essentially this is the application. And if you notice, oh, and I'm still looking around for other things, I guess, or I'm demoing the app to you, one of those two. But if you notice the way the app is structured, there's three marked regions here. There's the main application region where all the list of the VMs are. There's the log region where you see all the code running, and then there's the notification region up top where we give notifications on what's happening in the application. And these are all managed regions. So to dive a little bit more into the kinds of technologies we built for this, the streamer was the logs that you saw there. And the way we do it is on the onstart of our Marionette application, we just open a socket connection to our server, and then anytime the server sends a log, this function onServer log is called, and it just puts all that data into logs, which is a Marionette collection. And it automatically renders, does all that stuff for us. So another thing around the logs, if you notice, like when I was typing around in the search box, the list was like being filtered, and that's implemented using this thing called filter collection. I think I found this code on the internet too, modified it a little bit, and then essentially like got it to work for our app. What I want to show you here is to create a filtered collection, you define two things. You give it the collection and you give it the filter function. The filter function is the function that you use to whether select an item or not, and the collection is the original collection. And what you get back is essentially another Marionette collection. So instead of putting your original collection onto whatever view you were going to show it in, you put this filtered collection and you get filtering for free. So whenever, like, whatever UI element you have that gets you to handle the filtering event fires, you essentially have got a filtered collection. You don't need to worry about the implementation of it at all. Another thing I showed you was the notification up top. And the way we do it is guess what? We create another collection and stick it onto our main application. And the way you And essentially, what it is it's a backbone model with the options that you can see down there. And they have the type information, the timeout, whether it's dismissible or not, and the message you have. So this is the minimal list of things you need to define to see uh, a message. And on the view side, uh, this is the implementation of the view. You can see that the class name is kind of ugly, but that's because we're using Bootstrap for our CSS, and it kind of wants you to define class names to get the different colors. So we're like, whatever, let's just shove everything there. And the on show, you can see that we have a delayed bind on a cleanup script. So every time the notification is dismissed, we go back in and we clean up the model so that we don't have zombie objects lying around. Um, so two things I want to tell you about this. One, this code is not clean, but it's kind of localized. Your entire application is not dirty. This one place is. Um, but wherever you're sending messages, all you do is you create an event and you pass it that exact object that was in the model. And this is the minimal set of things you need to define for a notification anyways. A subset of this, I should say, because these are defaults that you put in. And it'll just work. You can send a notification from anywhere in an application, which means the developers that write the application are much more prone to do these things. So they're much more prone to create these UI elements that will give the user more alerts on like what's happening in the application. Oh, another thing, I just want you guys to look at this Probably. So it's almost like a DSL in some sense. You have your UI elements defined. You have your bindings. The bindings is like these are the elements in the UI that we use to tie into our model, so we auto update them. That's because we're lazy. It doesn't work well when your application scales, but for our smaller context, like the developer doesn't have to go in every time and figure out every place that this model is passed through to eventually get to the server. You just get all this for free. And the events is the regular set of events on the UI that you define. But essentially, once you understand that that's what it does, once you understand how to look at this one item view, you can essentially look at all of the item views in the application. It makes it a lot easier for you to understand what's going on in the application at large. Another thing we sort of had to work around was the template loading. We decided to use Mustache.js, and essentially the way we decided to render this is we shove a bunch of JavaScript onto a global object in a hash, and then we just refer to it. We didn't design this. We stole it from another team at Etsy, Jason Lester. They used it before, but this wouldn't scale for us, but it completely works for us. On the PHP side, what we do is we just look at that folder which has all of the templates, and we build a script tag, put all of the stuff there, and put it onto the app at page load. So every time a page is called, it gets this JavaScript hash of the templates for free. This does not scale, but this is an internal tool. We have only 275 clients at this time, and the nice thing about this right now is we haven't had to look at it twice. Once we implemented it, it just worked. This is something we never have to think about, so it's nice to have. I found this on the internet. I wanted to use it because I wanted modal interactions, so I did, and it wasn't too difficult to use. I could put it into an item view, and it hooked in pretty effortlessly. I was able to call item view stuff from inside of it. I was able to use its hooks to use to tie into Marionette as well. The point I'm trying to make here is it's really easy to plug and play things. So why Marionette.js? This, I guess I should have put this slide earlier on in my talk, but I didn't because this was sort of a learning process for us as well. Starting out was a little bit of leap of faith, but these are the things we realized were so nice to have in Marionette that we decided to stick around. The community is absolutely helpful. From day one, when I had no idea how to build even backbone applications, I just jumped onto the channel, asked a bunch of silly questions, and the core developers and everyone else was super helpful. Great upgrade support. We started at 1.78, something of that sort, I'm not sure. Uh, but there were some scripts that I found built by the core developers, I believe, that you just ran and it told you what kind of breaking changes your application had. So I went and fixed those, and within an hour, I'd upgraded the application to 2 point something. This kind of thing is great for us because we have a lot of tools, and we don't necessarily give all of the tools the love we should. So we end up being careless about these things. But with this kind of upgrade support, we get to still use all the new and cool things that are coming out, and we don't have to worry about putting in massive time effort to make sure our application is able to support it. We just run it. It's adopted in the company as well. There's a ton of teams now picking up Marionette, which makes it all the more easier. There's more resources to go to, but then again, there's the community is so helpful, so you might not even need this. It's plug and play. As I showed some examples, you can really put it in, fit it, and make it work with anything. It's really flexible if you kind of don't want to buy into some kind of technology. You don't want to commit to something. Um, you might find yourself committing to a library and they change things completely in version 2.0. That's probably not something you'd get in Marionette. And I just put the collection view here because that's like 80% of what we do. Like you just stick something to the collection view, and then all you're doing is adding one more model, and everything is taken care of. In Backbone land, you'd have to worry about all these nested templates and managing all of these things. You don't have to worry about any of this in Marionette. So what's the future of Marionette like at Etsy? I'm sort of talking from the more infrastructure perspective here, but we're super excited about behaviors. We haven't used it yet, but it allows us to encapsulate a bunch of things together that would have been difficult to otherwise, so UI and like event handling and stuff. And I believe this can be completely pushed out to the community. What I mean by that is someone can make a behavior, put it on the web, and it's fairly abstract enough that anyone can implement it. You can make changes to it, push it back up, and it's kind of like a library, but it's like a snippet of code. I think behaviors shows a lot of promise in those regards. Um, Inside of Etsy, we're entertaining this idea called Skeletor, which is essentially we're trying to build a skeleton app like the one Jason showed earlier. Except this, we have a little bit of our internal concerns, so we want to use Composer for our packaging because that's what we're planning to implement company-wide. But essentially, it's abstract enough for you to build one set of tools that you can use in a bunch of different places. So for us who build infrastructure tools, we probably want the statuses of what's happening on the servers in a bunch of other tools, and we get to build these things once and use it forever. Migration support, I've already talked a lot about this. I hope the core team is still going to keep providing great migration support. And adoption. Adoption is something we're seeing in the JavaScript community at large and inside the company as well. And it's really exciting to know that there's a lot of new changes happening, new things coming out. So what worked? Essentially, I want to sum up all the things I talked about. Marionette has helped us simplify our implementation. So anything you go in to make, any change you want to make, it shouldn't be difficult for you to do. So what I'm talking about is, for example, if you want to show a notification, all you do is you define this object that is the parameters you define for your message, and it essentially works. You can even copy and paste this from somewhere else. You don't need to understand how all of the app works. You just need to sort of be able to tell, oh, this seems like a notification, and you can copy and paste it and have it work without changing anything else except the message you want to change. Simplify your abstractions. This becomes really important, especially if your app's going to be long-lived, because the less defined your boundaries are, the more people are likely to tread them. So if you have gray lines, they're going to become more and more, they're going to break down more and more. But if you're able to provide concrete abstractions that are very simple, the people that come in to work on your application, the new developers, will totally understand them and help fortify them. So this builds the quality, this extends the quality and the life cycle of your product. Leverage existing resources, we wouldn't have been able to build the tool without the community support and support inside of the company. And on that note, we're also trying to help other teams and hopefully the community with like building additional resources. One of the things we've done for this is we have a code lab for Virtual Madness inside of the company. So what this is for someone who has no idea how to write JavaScript or Marionette or Backbone, who's never had time to check it out, we give them a little patch which has a bunch of changes that are like very basic, like a tutorial. It describes what Backbone Marionette is, what the different kinds of views are and stuff. And at the end of the code lab, we link you to a live ticket. So this is a problem that we'd like to be solved in the VMS tool. So essentially, at the end of this code lab, you start working on this project. And if you're stuck, you ask one of the developers that have been working on it. The developer goes in. They work stuff out together. So it's a learning experience for the new person that's coming in. And for the person that's managing the tool, you get to see what kind of problems people have, what kind of things people get confused with. So you get to build those, you get to fortify those walls better. So you get to create better abstractions. This has been working really well for us. We're only seeing the quality of the tool get better over time. And that brings me to the end of my talk. If you have questions, I'd love to take them now. We're also hiring. If you guys are interested in any of this stuff, etsy.com/careers.
Well, I guess the obvious question is, have you used Inspector on top of this, right?
What is that? Sorry.
Did you use Inspector on top of this?
Inspector was not built at the time, but to give you a little bit of history, while Inspector was being built, Jason had come up with sort of like a version 0.01, I want to say, and we actually have it hooked up to the tool. So the code lab kind of walks you through some of the Inspector stuff. Inspector is like way cooler right now. You can do a lot more things with Inspector than you can with what the code lab offers. But that was one of the ways we incorporated it into the tool so that it would make it easier for people to jump on board.
Any other questions? I actually have a question.
Sure.
One of the slides you showed the bindings. Is that something you guys wrote, or is that two-way data binding?
Oh, that comes from a library called Stickit.
Okay, so it is two-way data binding using a plugin.
It is two-way data binding, and it's not without its problems. But we have that thing is being used for our create VM page, which is fairly simple. It's just like one form. Anything you define there, you'd probably want to save onto your model anyways. Mm-hmm. So we get away with using it there.
Okay, cool. Then my other question, since I'm not super familiar with VMs, do you do that so you can log in as somebody on a different machine and then you go to Etsy that way? Or I'm trying to understand
I see.
Why all the VMs?
So every developer, when they join the company, gets a virtual machine to work on. So that's where your code lives. That's where your application runs from. Slightly outside the context of a JavaScript talk, but we do this so that we can maintain state in the VMs better. So, for example, if you're working on everything from your laptop, it's a lot more difficult for us to control what kind of environment we provide for you. Whereas if it's running on a server in the internal network all the time, we can run a set of commands and tools on it to exactly describe the state of it. So everyone gets the uniform experience. So you don't experience personal problems, unique problems with it. If you have a problem, it's most likely the case that a lot of other developers have the same problems. So it helps us just provide a better, smoother experience.
So all employees would log into the VM?
Right. And then they'd log into their own VM.
And does that mean they have no choice in the IDE they use? You just give them one and they use the same?
So IDEs, people who use IDEs, they use a couple of different ways. They can have a local checkout on their laptop, but they sync the data onto your VM. But when you go to, say you're working on the Etsy web app, on my VM I have nsubedi.vms.etsycorp.com, for example. That would be my VM. So when I go to that page, it shows me my development version of Etsy. But if I wanted to use the IDE, I'd probably like get a separate checkout on my laptop, and when I'm ready to push the changes, I'd sync it onto. I can set it to auto sync or whatever onto my VM, and that's where it gets rendered.
Okay. So I could use WebStorm basically. That was my question.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people do. I think Jason's team, a bunch of people use that. We obviously like to just hop on the terminal, but.
Any
Any other questions?
Thanks, Nishan.
Thank you, guys.